So good evening and welcome. It's so good to see all of you. Thank you very much for making time to be with us this evening. Just before we get started, I've got a few housekeeping items so that we're all reminded of a few things. So I'd ask all of you to please, as we go through this, keep your mic muted unless you're speaking. This just helps with everyone else's sound quality. And we're going to do our best to keep this meeting to 1 hour. I know that this is a busy time of year. People have many responsibilities, and I certainly want to be respectful of that. So we'll try to aim for about 45 minutes of presentation, and then we'll open the floor to questions. And we already received a few, and we'll do our best to answer those questions as well. If you have additional questions as we go through this evening, I'll invite you to pop them into the chat as we go along. And we'll have my colleague Jen keep track of those and make sure that we answer those as best as we can during this meeting. Of course, at the end, when we at that final 15 minutes, if you have additional questions, please, speak and use your voice if that's your preferred way of asking your questions. Now, I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are gathered here on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the Oji-Cree, the Dakota, the Dene people, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. Every time we acknowledge this truth, I invite you to join me in reflecting on all of those things that we are doing and can do more of to make Manitoba a better and more just place for everybody who lives here. Now, you probably know after all of these years that we have committed to a culture of mindfulness here at St.Amant. And what we often do at the beginning of a meeting is allow ourselves a few moments to be present in this space together that we're sharing now. And I'll invite you to join me in a mindful moment. So wherever you are in space, wherever you find yourself at the moment, I invite you to feel yourself in your chair, your feet on the ground, and allow yourselves a few moments to breathe and arrive in this space together. Thank you very much. Now, of course, with virtual meetings like this, especially in the evening, I know you may have many other responsibilities that you're trying to manage. And so please don't hesitate if you need to turn off your camera at any time if you need to attend to anything. On today's agenda, we're going to share a few strategic updates and also some organizational updates, and we'll have some time for questions as well. Before that, though, I'd like to introduce myself and some of my colleagues. I've met some of you, others, it's my great pleasure to meet you for the first time. My name is Ben Adaman. I'm the president and CEO here at St.Amant. I'm new to this role. It's been about 7 months or so, but I've been at St.Amant for coming on almost 9 years now. And it's my great pleasure to continue to be working alongside all of my colleagues here as they do just incredible work to make Manitoba better for people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. I'd like to introduce some new directors that you may or may not have had the opportunity to meet as well. And I will start in what's my top right with Amanda Newhook, the interim director for clinical services. So Mandy is leading many of our teams, and she'll be speaking with us tonight. So Mandy, thanks for being here this evening. I'd also like to welcome Caroline Kramer, our Director of Operations, Young Ramon, our Acting Director of Autism Programs, and Julia Piemeier, our new Chief Financial Officer. So thank you all for being here. So we'll start with some strategic updates, if I may. Our annual strategic projects are the tools that we use to move our strategic plan forward. We've got approximately 12 projects currently on the go, and we'll be providing updates from those projects that are hitting key milestones at every town hall. Today, we'll highlight 2 projects and also bring some quick updates for 2 additional projects. And I'll begin by inviting Mandy Newhook to present on the new case management services for families who have a child diagnosed with autism. Mandy, over to you.
Hey, thank you, Ben, for that introduction. Jen, can I please ask you to share the PowerPoint? Thank you. Okay, thank you. So I am pleased to be able to share this information with you this evening about a new initiative at St.Amant. So it's case management for children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Next slide, please. And Jen, I'm not sure if it's in the slideshow presentation.
Okay, what are you seeing? I'm seeing two different things.
It looks like it's like it's not the slideshow.
It's in notes form,
Yeah.
Jen.
Okay, hang on. Let me see if I can fix this, you guys. I'm gonna try this again.
There we go.
That's
Thank
better?
you.
Okay.
Technology. We'll get it right one day. Okay, so first of all, you may be wondering, what is case management? So case management is helping a family plan, advocate, and connect to available resources. This is a service that has been historically done by the province. The job title in government is a community services worker, or CSW. You probably heard it, the job title as that. And in the last few years, service agencies have begun to offer case management services on behalf of the province. Next slide, please, Jen. In April 2022, the Manitoba government announced $5 million in new funding for children's disability services. The purpose of the new funding is to increase access to therapies for children with disabilities and to strengthen supports for children and youth with autism and their families. The government recognized the need to expand case management services as many families are on wait lists. This new funding will expand case management services for children, and the province has chosen St.Amant to deliver case management for children diagnosed with autism. So why would we take this work on? Next slide, please, Jen. There are many connections to our mission, vision, and values. Our strategic plan states our vision for innovation. St.Amant works in partnership to address unmet needs in our community by creating new services and developing more holistic, person-centered supports. Our goals: that people have the best possible health, physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, and cultural dimensions of health. As we get to know people and how best to support them, we make a conscious effort to know the whole person and all of their needs. People have access to person-centered supports where and when they need them. We take direction from the person. We honor choice. We support only when needed and ask rather than assume. Our objectives: that we identify service gaps and ways to increase access to services for our community. We build partnerships with other service providers to clarify roles, reduce redundancy, and strengthen our community. This work also fits with St.Amant's vision for capacity building. St.Amant recognizes it has a leadership role and responsibility in demonstrating and promoting evidence-based practice in the broader community. Our goal is that partnerships have been built to thrive in a changing environment. We prioritize our commitment to partnerships and to meeting community needs as identified. Our objectives: to lead the coordination of services and create seamless supports with all service providers and other stakeholders in Manitoba. This work also aligns with our values of collaboration, hospitality, excellence, and respect. We are experienced in providing a wide range of compassionate, flexible, and high-quality services for families of children and youth with autism spectrum disorder. We believe that we're well positioned to offer excellent case management support to families as we're familiar with services and service delivery, and we can advocate for families in a different way. This will also bring family feedback closer to service delivery and help us identify gaps and unmet needs. Next slide, please. So case management services will operate within clinical services. It will operate completely separate and distinct from autism programs and will serve all families, no matter what therapy choices they make for their children. We will be hiring social workers to be caseworkers in this role. Their job is to provide families with all the information so that they can make an informed choice that's right for their child and their family. Caregivers will continue to have access to the same therapy choices and services as they have with the Department of Families. We recognize that some families may be concerned about how we're going to handle potential conflict resolution or perceived conflict of interest when their case manager is employed by St.Amant, and they may have concerns that arise about a service that their child is receiving at St.Amant with another service area. So we're working on a process for conflict resolution and escalation that will be transparent and easy to understand. We would like to engage with families about that process and helping develop it and ensure that it meets everyone's needs. This process is a priority for us. Next slide, please. So our team will include me as the interim director, Debbie Skora as the interim manager. We will have a team of caseworkers as well as administrative assistants. We're looking to hire social workers, as I mentioned, into the caseworker role. The scope of the work will be the same as a CSW as it is in the Children's Disability Services Department. Families will not have a CSW and a caseworker, so the St.Amant caseworker will perform the full scope of that role. Families will have the same access to the same supports and services offered by the province. So there will be no changes to financial plans or anything that's in place. If a family has multiple children with different diagnoses, Children's Disability Services will work with the family to determine which agency makes the most sense for that family. So families will not have multiple caseworkers. There will only be one caseworker working with the family. I will clarify here that this initiative is different and separate from the case management pilot on the adult side. So this is new funding provided by the province, and these will be new positions created at St.Amant to deliver case management for children and youth diagnosed with autism to eliminate the wait list. Okay, next slide, please. So our scope, we will be providing services all over the province. In clinical services, we're experienced in providing services to rural and remote areas. We have experience in delivering community-based, person and family-centered services. Families will transfer over from Children's Disability Services in phases. We will begin with families in the Western region, as well as families in Winnipeg who are on the wait list for a case manager. Exact timing will depend on St.Amant staff recruitment and training. In total, we expect to support 2,500 to 3,000 families through this service once the transition is complete. Youth who are 15 years or older will remain with Children's Disability Services so that we're not disrupting any age of majority planning that's already in place. Going forward, we will be supporting children and youth right up to age of 18 before they enter into the adult system. We commit to working with families and learning from them during and after this transition. We're currently planning some virtual information sessions for families, and we'll share those dates and times once they are available. Next slide, please. And that brings me to the end of the formal presentation. I am open to answering any questions if there are any.
I'm just going to weigh in here, Amanda. Thank you for that presentation. But I've certainly been hearing from families that they had no idea that this was happening and only knew of it when they received a letter saying that this was what was going to happen. And I just think that that's a very disrespectful process. And I know that we're talking about, you know, values and so I'm just saying, families are also part of the service delivery process. And I think that there needs to be some handle on how agencies, government, organizations communicate with families in a way more respectful way. I mean, we talked about that we don't want to assume. Well, I can tell you, getting a letter in the mail about the services that your children are going to change in such a dramatic way is, I think, profoundly concerning and upsetting. And I'm just putting that out there. So if that can be relayed back in any way, or if parents or families, you can suggest how we do that in order to change that process, please weigh in. Thanks.
Thank you, Doreen, for that feedback. Definitely important to hear about more effective ways to share information with families. We've worked with the government around how to roll out communication. So certainly open to hearing feedback, and for future, we definitely want to be able to communicate effectively with the families we're supporting.
Well, Mandy, thank you very much for that presentation. Doreen, thank you for your question. If I may add just a couple of comments. So first of all, I want to recognize Mandy's, the hard work that Mandy and her team and colleagues have done to, from this point forward, ensure that this transition occurs in as open and transparent and respectful a fashion as possible. There is active planning underway right now to hold a number of gatherings for families where we can engage and respond to their questions directly. There's also been work done to reach out to advocacy organizations and others to provide them the information that they would need should families come to them with questions. I'll also mention that there are, to my knowledge, no layoffs planned within government associated with this work. Staff are being redeployed, but no one will lose their jobs because of this change. Okay. I'd now like to introduce Peter Duff, Director of Community Projects, who will share a presentation about the River Road Housing Project and also an update on the Meaningful Connections Project. Peter?
Thanks, Ben. And nice to see you all tonight. Thank you for giving me some time on your agenda to share some update information. I'm going to try and share my screen, so bear with me for a second. River Road housing update. Ben, I can see you. Does that look like you're seeing good? Okay, thank you for the thumbs up. Alrighty, so the River Road housing development is a strategic plan project. It is part of our 5-year strat plan. It falls under the innovation priority, but we also think it falls, it could easily fall under the quality of life priority. And the broadly stated goal for this project is to develop 3 new accessible community homes on the property at 440 River Road. We're doing this as part of our commitment to supporting people to live in the least restrictive, inclusive community environments, and because of our commitment to building innovative and accessible housing that appropriately meets the needs of the people that will live there. So both of those are kind of the motivating conditions for trying to move this project forward. Why would we build on River Road? That's certainly been a question that's been asked, and I think the answers are that it is available property that we already own. It's getting increasingly hard for us to find suitable residential building lots in neighborhoods where people would like to live that are close to good amenities. And so this land is in a desirable community with good access to lots of amenities. And to buy 3 building lots would have cost almost $1 million ahead of even starting to build anything. So the other reasons we talked about is, St.Amant is one of the communities of service that falls under the Réseau Compassion Network. And there are other communities of service. And as we were talking about developing these homes, there was some conversation about, if there are other communities of service that might be interested in this kind of housing, there might be options there for people. As I will inform you throughout this presentation, we are using all of the spaces we're developing. So we aren't making them available to other communities of service right now, but that was part of the conversation about building here. The other thing that we talked about is that, we know that there are some folks who are anxious about moving to community, and that the location of these homes on a familiar piece of land close to what they know and are familiar with might make it easier to take that step into community. So we were thinking that this might be more palatable to some of the people we support who are anxious about a move. What's taking so long? I know many of you have been at previous town halls going back probably several years now, where we've been talking about developing these homes. And I've had conversations with some of you where you've let me know you're not seeing anything happening and wondering what's taking so long. So the answer to that is multi-factor. First and foremost, probably the global pandemic interrupted lots of the project work we were intending to do for the better part of 3 years. In addition to that, we had some project team changes for this particular project. So, some of the folks in operations roles retired and new people were hired, and all of that led to sort of some pausing and then restarting around the work that was underway. We did go to tender almost a year ago now with an initial design and plan, and we had a budget that was set by our CEO and CFO, as well as the board. The original tenders came back in at between $1 and $2 million beyond the budget that had been approved. What that meant for us was that we needed to then go to our funder to try and get some kind of commitment, even if it's just in principle, that they would fund the increased cost of building these homes. So that re-engagement with our funder resulted in some design changes. The original designs that we put to tender were to build one bungalow and two-story homes where there was an accessible main floor and then suites above that could be used for folks that didn't need accessibility, but who needed a living arrangement that was in proximity to a staffed resource. Our funder let us know they were not interested in those hybrid builds, the two-story, and asked us to please just build our standard accessible bungalows. So we had to go back to the consultant group, the architect and various engineers for a redesign, and that also introduced some lag into our ability to move things forward. And then finally, in the late summer of 2022, we discovered that there were some site issues, existing requirements related to a dike that runs through our property, and a requirement that we do not build anything that would encroach on the dike. So we've had to go to the city and request an amendment to the caveats that are attached to our property so that this build can go forward. And that introduced delay again in our ability to move things forward. But we think we have everything in hand now, and hopefully those of you that have been on the property have seen that there is fencing up and work is getting underway. So what we are building is 3 bungalows, providing 10 beds of service. There's 2 3-bed bungalows that are our standard, no basement, fully accessible, 1-level homes for 3 people. And then the middle unit is what we're calling a purpose-built home, which has some design features that are, it's still accessible on the main floor, but it's built for folks that have needs more related to behavior that might be challenging at times. That home has a full basement underneath it that provides an additional almost 3,000 square feet of space for people to recreate in and have access to for activities and things like that. The timeline for the project now is that the mobilization to the site has started. We expect that piles will be drilled and poured. That'll get underway towards the end of this month. And the project is anticipated to take 12 months to get to completion of all 3 homes. So we expect that by February 2024, we will be very close to opening the 3 buildings. This is how the homes are laid out on the site. This home A will be 424 River Road. Home B is 430. Home C is 436. This is the access road, which is also a dike. It's part of the dike system. And this is the home that was troublesome around encroaching on that dike. And so we've gone through the process of requesting an amendment from the city so that we could build there. There's lots of nice landscaping planned for this location. I'm going to show you some sort of artist sketches of what these homes might look like. This is the front perspective looking south. This is River Road, and our main building is back in here somewhere, and Action Marguerite is over there. The access points, the driveways and garages are all oriented towards our property for this build. So probably the main entrance that will be used by the people residing here will be this back entryway. And each of the homes has a completely fenced yard. And then there's a nice kind of common space with walking pathways, and there'll be lots of nice plantings in here so that this will be a fairly attractive space to be. And I think we'll blend really nicely with the rest of the neighborhood here. So building these homes is a part of honoring those commitments that I mentioned at the beginning. We are continuing to transition people from health and transition services into community. And we are also transitioning folks coming out of Manitoba Developmental Center, which will close by the end of March of 2024. So the River Road housing development is 3 homes. We have 4 additional homes that we have underway at other community locations. In total, we'll be supporting 10 people to move from H&TS and 10 people to move from MDC into these homes over the course of the next year. So that's a bit of an update. We'll pause here to do 2 things. One is to close this presentation and get ready for another one. And also in case there are any questions. Stop sharing. There we go. Not seeing or hearing any questions.
Well, I'm going to weigh in here, Peter.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess I'm just a spokesperson for families, but giving my own background. But I know that with some of the changes with the behavioral options that are attached and from the cottages, with their redevelopment, I mean, some of the families, there was no input on some of what families thought were really important in terms of what might be included in the design. And I don't know about you, but I know that I've lived in enough homes that I'm a pretty good judge of what needs to be involved in a family purposed accommodation. And so I'm just wondering, I mean, it's fine to have architects and it's fine to have, engineers, et cetera, but, does anybody involve families in their input in terms of some of the design and some of the things that might, make a building a home? So, because I know that that's something that some families have been very concerned about in the cottages, and we're not asked about what was needed in that design, and it's just not, I don't know, I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Doreen. And yes, you certainly are a spokesperson for families. I think in terms of the design of community homes, we've, over the course of the last 15 or 18 years, we've built almost 20 of these accessible homes, and they're all variations on a theme. And I think there's only so many ways you can actually lay out a 3-bed, 1-level accessible home. But we have tried, I think, based on the experience of people we support and their families and the staff that work in these homes, to make refinements over the course of time that get factored into new builds that are coming along. So I think we're always open to hearing feedback about what might make things work better from the perspective of the people living in the home and their families. So yeah, I guess I would just say we're if people have feedback, we're generally pretty open to it. As these homes are being built, we do try and include the people that will live there in the choice around furnishings and colors that walls will be painted and that kind of thing. So folks definitely have a voice in the decoration of a home. And yeah. But thanks, Doreen. Appreciate it. Before I try and load my next presentation, which is a little bit briefer, I'm hoping that Jennifer will share a video with us that serves as a really great introduction into the Meaningful Connections project and some of the important things that are happening there.
Russ loves motorcycles, he loves WWE wrestling.
Yeah.
If it's got big macho energy, he's all behind it. He especially loves Harley Davidson. Has lots and lots of gear, but especially over the pandemic, didn't have a way of connecting with anyone in the community very much. And I think felt a little bit depressed because he was isolated and didn't have a chance to meet new friends. So we've known about the autism ride for a while, and Russ actually buys tickets to the raffle. This year when we found out they were doing the full ride at the Harley Davidson store where Russ likes to go, we knew we needed to be involved somehow.
Right?
So Russ and I asked if we could volunteer, and we sold 50-50 tickets. And Russ had a chance to meet lots of new friends, but especially Fred. So Fred spent some time getting to know Russ during lunch and offered to take Russ for a ride on his bike. Russ wasn't quite ready for that, but he got to rev it. And after the ride, we all went to Tim Hortons to get to know each other better. And Russ has been meeting with Fred regularly ever since. They've become really good friends. They share pictures of what they've been doing. Russ loves to show Fred pictures of things he's been doing. Fred shows us photos of his dogs and his grandkids, and they just talk about different rides out there and different events that Russ might enjoy going to.
A real good friend of mine, and everybody I tell that when I come down there, they want me to do other stuff. Guys, no, I gotta go see my buddy Russ. Oh, he's more important than me. Yeah, he is, because he's a good friend. Could almost go to the point and say we're alone. As a friend.
We're able to go to the autism ride. It made a change for Russ. He became a totally different person. So much happier, so proud to have a new friend, and the richness it's brought to his life over the last number of months has been pretty remarkable.
Like even yesterday on my ride out to Morden, I got to go to rest tomorrow. It's a big part of my day.
This is what we work for. Like this is it. This is the brass ring, I left that day in tears because Russ had finally made a real friend that wasn't being paid for his time, had no reason to be with Russ other than the fact that he's awesome and that they connected on a real level.
That's great. Thank you, Jen. I've I've seen that video, I don't know, 10 times now, and it chokes me up every single time. Oops, am I sharing my screen right now? No, I'm not. Okay, I need to do this, share my screen. Ben, I'm looking to you for a thumbs up again. Good, thank you. So yes, you just saw that lovely video of about Russ and Fred and their connection. And Renee, who was the staff that supported that, played a subtle but important role in making sure that that friendship was given opportunity to develop and then nurtured. And so the Meaningful Connections Project is another of our strategic priorities. It is a 5-year project plan. It falls under the quality of life priority in our strategic plan. And very broadly stated, the goal that we set for ourselves was to try and make sure that everybody who wanted more connection in their life, everybody we support residentially who wanted more connection in their life, would have 2 new unpaid connections by the end of the project. And the pathway that we thought we needed to follow in order to get to that happening was to expand the skill, knowledge, and ability of our staff to intentionally develop and facilitate connection opportunities. I'm going to focus mostly in this update to you on some of the contributions we've had from foundations that have enabled us to do some really important things around this project. So Réseau Compassion Network and the St.Amant Foundation have both come to the table with money that support elements of this project in very important elements. The first of these was our connection to an agency in Cincinnati in the US called Starfire. And when we first started talking about this project, we thought there's got to be agencies out there that have been on this journey already to figuring out how to get people more connected into their communities. And we went looking and we found Starfire. And the Réseau Compassion Network provided us with a $30,000 innovation grant to contract with Starfire to provide some leadership orientation, to share their story about their journey with us, and then to teach us about a framework that they have used with good success to get people more connected into community. So that engagement with Starfire actually started right before the pandemic was declared in this part of the world. And so we had a number of pauses. We thought, okay, it's safe to maybe start doing this. And then we'd have a flare in our communities. And so we paused and restarted 3 times, I think, with Starfire. And our engagement with them just ended about 10 months ago now. One of the important things that they taught us about was this project design session framework, which is essentially facilitated group sessions that involve what we call an exploring pair. And an exploring pair is a person with support needs and a support staff, or it could be a family member that's going to walk alongside them as they think about and plan and ultimately implement a connection activity. And those can be a range of things, from planning a barbecue in the local neighborhood to organizing a craftsperson's fair that invites other members of the community in. The projects are usually built around a passion that the supported person has for something. And then their exploring pair partner helps them to figure out where in the community are these things that I'm interested in or passionate about happening. So the example you see with Russ and Fred there, the passion was Russ's love of Harley-Davidson motorcycles and an opportunity to volunteer at an event that would have him in touch with people who shared that passion. And then a very thoughtful support staff who's watching for where is the opportunity for connection to happen here, who out of these hundreds of people might be interested in having a deeper relationship than just sharing the experience of this day together. And so that was, a recognition that Fred was a guy that might be open to more. She had to make sure to get Fred's contact information and then to support Russ to follow up and reach out to Fred for a coffee after that day, and then to keep on doing that and building and deepening that relationship. So that's an example of what we're hoping can happen for many of the people that we're supporting around whatever their interests and passions might be. One of the things we've found in our experience over the last 10 months, while we've been doing these project design sessions, is that the exploring pairs of people lose momentum between project design sessions. So they come together, they have a conversation, they make a plan, and then they go away, and people get busy doing other things. And so they may not take a lot of steps towards moving their plan into action. So we asked Réseau Compassion Network again and the St.Amant Foundation to provide funding for 2 positions. These are 2 full-time, 2-year term roles that will essentially walk alongside and mentor these exploring pairs and mentor the support teams and the team leaders around how do we build capacity so that we can encourage and support this connection behavior in our staff ongoing. So each of those organizations came to the table with $150,000 over that 2-year period for a total of $300,000 to make these roles a reality. And they will work in collaboration with the person that facilitates the project design sessions. That's Bree Brown. Many of you may know who Bree is. She works in volunteer services, and these positions will also be housed within volunteer services and work collaboratively with that team and the program teams. So I'm really excited to see us be able to move some of these things forward over the next couple of years, and really grateful that we have access to St.Amant Foundation as a partner and the Réseau Compassion Network. So I'm going to stop there. I think that's my last slide. And again, just pause to see if there's any thoughts or questions that people might have about that project. Seeing none, I will mute myself. Oh,
I think Janet has a question.
sure.
How long is the project then? A couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of our current 5-year strat plan, which is scheduled to lapse, I think, in the next year or 2. But we had some slowdown related to the pandemic. So I think we're just starting to pick up speed and energy again around this project.
And then how many participants do you anticipate being involved in that?
Well, if we counted everybody we support in a residential setting, I think we would be in the neighborhood of 300 plus people that we're trying to help make connections. Not all of them will be interested in more connection though, so it'll probably be something less than that. But
So how does it come down to the individual then? Comes through from the house manager, or how does it come to them? How do you get involved? How does it
well, everybody we support residentially is invited to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you're right. It starts with kind of the immediate support team,
Mm-hmm.
sitting down and going through a social network assessment, basically who's in your life right now, what's their connection to you, and are you satisfied with this level of connection, or is there something more you want? And that then becomes the foundation of, okay, yes, I want to have more friends, or I want to have more contact with family members that I don't see very much. And
So,
that feeds the planning.
yeah, so family and their support networks are involved in that planning?
Yes, yeah, should be.
Yeah. Okay. All right. How come I haven't heard about it?
I don't know. Where does your loved one live?
In a community residence? I mean,
Well,
I've heard about it briefly, but there's really nothing coming down, to me,
yeah.
to my support network for my daughter.
Well, Janet, I hope that'll change very soon.
Oh, well, it will. It'll starting tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah.
Starting tomorrow, there'll be an email.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. No, I guess, that goes back to the communication, I think that Doreen kind of raised, that, families need to hear that kind of stuff, more than just a fleeting, I don't know how it comes to families,
Yeah. It should be coming through the whatever normal chains of communication you have, because it's directly impacting the nature of care and support that your loved one is receiving.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
But I guess every home might be different in terms of, what the communication is with the families in that home, for the individuals. So, I'm not sure, if I'm saying that, maybe there's other families that haven't heard or have no clue.
yeah.
And who are we counting on to give us the information?
Well, certainly we have work to do on that
Yep.
front. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just, maybe it's just the home where Sarah is, but kind of doubt it. But anyways.
Well, I appreciate the feedback, Janet.
Right.
Well, Peter, thank you very much for both of those presentations. Thank you all for your questions. And, just further to this very important question, Janet, about communication. Now that we have Bree in her role, and we'll soon have 2 more people whose sole reason for employment is to enable people to have meaningful connections, there should be much more intentional focus moving forward on meaningful communication, meaningful connections.
Yep.
And I certainly hope that if that's something that your daughter is keen to have, in her life, that her team leader and the team leader for the home and the staff engage with her to make that happen.
Well, I guess one of the other questions I have, and I guess
if I'm cutting in and out, I apologize, but I will.
The other issue is, and I'm sure you've dealt with that, is that the staff in the home where my daughter is are very busy. I mean, they're very, they have a lot of tasks. So, is it a matter of like, how do they do this on top of what they're already doing? You know what I mean? Like, if that's just an add-on, then it's hard for them to, get involved in another thing, if they're doing 500 things, now they're doing 510 or whatever.
Yeah, well, very good point. And I think the goal through the 2 years of this, focused project is to work to embed within people's regular daily work of meaningful connections. And so we'll have to learn how to do this in a way that that fulfills that imperative to support people to have meaningful connections, not as an add-on, but as really the essence of the work that
And
we look for
in
staff.
conjunction with other service providers, maybe around that person, like they're
Mhm.
involved in day programs and, you know, other
That's
things.
right.
Like, so how do you incorporate them into that planning? You know what I mean?
Indeed. Very
Yeah.
good points. Thank you very much for all of those observations.
Okay.
Now, if I may, I'm going to proceed with a few other updates. So I'd like to move along and share a quick update on the Community Respite and Family Support Pilot Project. So this is a 2-year project that offers out-of-home respite services to youth connected to Children's Disability Services whose families need more than the typical daytime only respite supports that CDS typically provides. And may even be, experiencing heightened pressure and stress and be at risk of breakdown. I'm sorry, I'm having some connection issues. Can you all hear me? Yeah, okay, good. So we have been for the last year providing respite at one home in Brandon and another in Winnipeg. The services include not only out-of-home overnight respite, but also wraparound clinical supports for the family and the child. And those supports can be available to the child both in the home during respite and in their family home the rest of the time. The goal is to give families the time and supports that they need to stay together. And I'm pleased to report at this point, as we're halfway through this project, so we're just about at the 1-year mark, that the outcomes have been very, very positive. So far, we've served 25 families across the 2 homes, the one in Brandon, the one in Winnipeg. And so far, we've provided 849 nights of respite to those families. And while many families have shared that at the beginning they were nervous about leaving their kids for respite, they've also shared that they and their kids have all had a great experience. Families have reported that their kids look forward to another respite stay, and some have even had new experiences, like a first trip to the zoo or a carnival, and other experiences that just build their quality of life and chance to engage with their community. One parent reported that the respite service meant that they and their spouse could have a couple's night out for the first time in years and years and years. So the out-of-home respite, what that means is it gives parents and siblings an opportunity to recharge while their child is having a good time at the respite home. And many of these families are also accessing counseling and other supports like occupational therapy or psychology supports that can help them feel better equipped to serve or to support their child over the long run. We've heard from our funders that many families have expressed that they wish this service existed a long time ago. And a couple of the families have indicated that, unfortunately, the relief came a little too late and they had to make the difficult decision to place their child in care. And so all of those experiences together just reinforce what a valuable service this is to our community. And we are working very hard to advocate to our funders to take this service and make it a permanent resource to our community. And frankly, we would love to see more options available to families. In addition to the 25 families that we're supporting now, our funders, our partners in government who control our waitlists and access to the service have identified another 22 families already who need this service. And so we want to be there for them and support those families to stay together. So I'm very pleased to share those updates. And I'd also like to share one more strategic update, if I may, which is about our strategic planning cycle. So our board of directors made the decision to extend our current strategic plan by 1 year. Because of the pandemic and for other reasons, we needed a little more time to finish all of the work that we're doing, and we're very appreciative to the board for their support in allowing us that extra time to accomplish the goals that we set for ourselves. Within the next few months, we will begin working with the board to develop the strategic planning process and to engage a consultant to support the work. A key part of the process will be to engage stakeholders. And of course, it goes without saying that families and the people we support are at the top of that list of people we need to speak to. Our responsibility as an organization is to continue to grow and change in order to stay relevant and to meet the unmet needs of our community, while also staying true to our core values and our commitment to human rights. So now is a great time for all of you to start thinking about where you think our organization should be focusing its energy over the coming years. As information becomes available, we will certainly be sharing it with you, and make sure that you're aware of what we're doing to ensure that strategic planning for the next 5 years is moving ahead. Now, before we move on to questions, I've got just a few organizational updates to share with you. And the first thing I'd like to do is to acknowledge that, of course, this past summer, we experienced a significant cybersecurity breach at St.Amant. And we're very grateful and relieved, frankly, to report that as far as we can tell, we were alerted just in time, and we were able to stop the hacker before any information was stolen, either personal health information or business-related information. So that significantly reduced the risk to our community, but we took this very seriously. And since that time, we've worked with cybersecurity specialists to enhance our security in a number of ways. And those include strengthening our password requirements and introducing multi-factor authentication for all staff. We now have in place 24/7 monitoring of our network. We have updated policies and procedures around access to some of the backend aspects of our network, strengthened our firewall, and we're also implementing a more rigorous records retention and destruction policy and process so that we know, should anything like this ever happen again, what information exactly is at risk so that we can manage and mitigate those risks further. We're also reviewing all of our privacy practices to ensure that as much as possible, we can do everything we can to protect the information that is entrusted to us as we provide service to so many people. We're still working with the Manitoba Ombudsman to ensure that we've taken every measure possible to safeguard the data that we're responsible for protecting. And we're confident that the measures we've taken and that the ones that we'll continue to implement as soon as we can will provide the safety and security that's needed. My last update for today, before we go to questions, is on the disability wage crisis. I'm sure you've all experienced or heard that all agencies in Manitoba supporting people in the community are having trouble recruiting direct support staff. A coalition that includes Abilities Manitoba, People First, Community Living Manitoba, the Family Advocacy Network, and the Alliance of Direct Support Professionals have been working tirelessly to advocate for increased wages that compensate employees for the level of responsibility that they carry, and to ensure that all direct support professionals across our entire sector, no matter where they work, have access to a standardized training program. We want to see this sector professionalized, and we want to see our colleagues who do that important work recognized through their compensation for the valuable work that they do, just as all other caring professions are. So I ask you to please add your voice to this campaign by calling or writing to your MLA or to the Minister of Families, Rochelle Squires, to help all of them understand from a family perspective just how important this issue is. Now, we know that the quality of services that we can provide is directly tied to the quality of our employees. And I can't begin to tell you how grateful we are for the incredible staff that we've got. But there's more need for more employees, and we are dealing with staffing challenges in a number of areas. Many of the staff in community homes are working overtime on a regular basis, and we know that's not sustainable. So I advocate for this issue at every opportunity. In fact, I'm seeing the Assistant Deputy Minister of Families tomorrow to continue with that advocacy. And again, I thank you for your help in adding your voices to this campaign. I also want to acknowledge that the challenges that we're experiencing in the community homes, we also experience in other areas of the organization, such as autism programs. Staff in that area, the autism tutors, also need a wage adjustment, one that reflects the important work that they do. We are in constant conversation with Children's Disability Services to address that wage issue. None of these issues are new. We all know that they've persisted for many, many years. And now, with demographic changes, inflation, and an increasing minimum wage, we simply are not able to compete for staff the way that we used to. So we know that this is placing undue and excessive pressure on other staff and on people we support and on the wait times for children and families. And I want you to know that we're doing what we can. And again, thank you for your help in bringing a good resolution to this important issue, because families' voices are the most powerful ones. Now, on that note, I would like to open the floor to any questions. Now, I'm not seeing any hands up.
I'm not seeing any hands up or anything coming into the chat, Ben. We did have some questions that came in via email. If you want me to
Sure.
let me find them out. Okay. Okay, so there is a question about in health and transition services, the switch to personal support workers and sort of like the balance of the personal care and the recreation programming. And basically, you know, kind of asking about like, what is the ratio? Like what number of residents does each personal support worker, are they responsible for per shift? You know, and how does this change sort of support quality of life? How do they make sure that they're able to do all of the personal care and recreation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Jen, thank you for that. So I'll answer that as best as I can. And I may need Todd's help a little bit to help to answer this as well. So the personal support worker role was reimagined not too long ago. And the idea was to really support staff to take a very holistic approach to working with the people that they support. So the idea was to support a deeper relationship between the people that we provide services to and the staff that are providing those services, in ways that allow staff to understand all of their needs in a very complete way. So not just, you know, for example, only sort of personal care or activities of daily living type needs, but also their communication needs, their interests, their preferences more broadly. So that is the rationale behind that change. And when it comes to staff ratios, it does depend on the unit. There are some units like stabilization where the ratios are 1-to-1, so one staff for every person supported. In the child and young adult area, it is one staff to every 2 to 3 people, and adult health services has the greatest ratio at one staff member for every 3 to 4 people. When you look at that from a hours of service per person per day perspective, we are approximately 4 times the average for long-term care. So typically in long-term care, people receive just shy of 4 hours of service per day. And I would argue that nobody thinks that is enough from a quality of life and quality of service perspective. Here, we're providing approximately 15 hours of service per person per day, which is a good part of the waking day for most people.
Okay, the next one is around the literacy and recreation programming. And so the Apple program was changed from being focused on one group of people to being available to everyone. So there's just a question around how that works.
Right. So I don't know all of the details of this, Todd. I'm going to need your help with this a little bit. But as I understand it, the Apple program evolved from being a resource with a sort of specific focus on a small group of people to becoming broader literacy-based service open to everybody at HNTS, if I'm not mistaken. Todd, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, just to echo what you're saying. I mean, the goal was always to provide a service that could be accessible for all. So when we made the change, we were supporting primarily the same 30 to 32 individuals. And for those people, it was an excellent service. They really enjoyed it. We wanted an opportunity to expand that. And it was always the intent that literacy would become part of your daily life and that we would have everybody sharing that. So it wasn't the specific role of the two people that worked there. It was everybody's responsibility to try and offer those things as they came up. The other thing is I wanted to mention something as well, is just that when we created the program, we're trying to be creative, and we did utilize some recreation resources from stabilization, and we wanted to breed some equity back into that. It's a very important group, and that we realized needed as much activity engagement as we could provide. So that was another reason and rationale for the change. And as I think you pointed out, Ben and Jen, we are absolutely acknowledging between the pandemics and some other things, it's been challenging, but the training is ongoing from our Recreation 2 instructors down to all PSWs, and the opportunity to use the literacy room and others is open. No limitations on hours, days, evenings, and on weekends as well.
Okay, thank you, Todd.
Okay, so there's a question around the River Road housing project. So the project that Peter updated about with those 3 new homes, whether the people who move from health and transition services into those homes, would they have access to the main building for exercise, school, medical appointments, etc.?
So that's a great question. And I would say that in general, if not always, we take a person-centered approach, and we would look for ways to meet the needs of that individual based on their preferences and their desire to be a part of their community. As much as possible, we do always try to support people to access the same community resources that are available to everyone around them. And that does, in that way, create some additional opportunities for engaging in those meaningful connections that Peter alluded to earlier in our time together.
There's a question about the strategic planning process, which I think you addressed the process and sort of timeline, Ben, but there's also sort of a more specific question around, how will families be able to be engaged, but how will information flow? And I think, one of the things that we actually just talked about today was, we serve almost 2,000 families. We have about, just over 20 families who were able to make it to the town hall today. And we were talking about, like, it's time for us to send out a survey to families to talk about, like, what is the best way for us to reach out and communicate and ensure that we're able to keep people informed. So I think, sorry to just sort of jump in and sort of try to answer this question a little bit, but I think I would say in the past, we've been communicating through e-newsletter and these town halls, and then also through your own program. But I think that we have work to do, as always. And so I hope that you'll see a survey hitting your inbox or your mailbox soon, so that we can learn, like, what is the best way for us to get this information out, and to be sure people are aware of what the process will be and how to engage with it, how to be included.
Thank you, Jen.
And then there's a question about why there's no bathtubs on the new stabilization units.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So all of the design elements of the stabilization unit are informed by the understanding of what those units are meant to be. So the stabilization unit is not intended to be a forever home for people. It is intended to be a short-term resource for people who are experiencing acute crisis and who require stabilization from a behavioral perspective or other perspective. And we have had people supported in that area who present with a wide range of needs and safety needs. And so from a safety perspective, the recommendation that was received by our team was that bathtubs can present a greater safety risk than showers. And so we went with showers. So all aspects of that space, everything, line of sight considerations to furniture to, I mean, you name it, all of it is driven by our obligation to keep people safe while they're in that space for the short time that they are intended to be in that space.
There's a couple of questions that center sort of around operational needs with like some outstanding repairs and empty soap dispenser, and then around the elevators.
Yeah, so if there are empty soap dispensers or other issues of that nature, I apologize for that. And certainly if you could please inform whoever your normal contact would be, at Health and Transition Services, is that if that is where these questions are coming from, they can inform operations, and we'll make sure to have those issues addressed as quickly as possible. With respect to the elevators, I am not aware, and I checked with Caroline Kramer prior to this meeting, we're not aware of any recent issues with people being stuck in the elevators. It has happened in the past, that's certainly true, but it's been quite some time since I've been aware of any recent elevator issues, and there is work underway to repair or replace those elevators, recognizing that they are that it is time to make those changes.
Okay, now there's a question about the indoor pool and when it will be open, but I think it is open. Is it open?
So it is open. Okay, and Todd, if people supporting HNTS want to use the pool, can they use the pool?
They can use the pool, and I know that Jennifer Bush is really trying to focus on scheduling and making sure that the pool is part of those. So I believe I don't have an update in front of me, but I can absolutely provide one, and next time you meet, we will. But the goal is to really ensure that people have access if they choose to on whatever schedule they would appreciate.
Okay, thank you, Todd. And Caroline, if you have something to add.
Yeah, and the pool it's restricted to HNTS right now, but there is some use. I wouldn't say that it's a high use currently, Todd, but and there's even some evening use that you guys had requested from us, and certainly. So yeah, there is flexibility for indoor pool use. Not that you'd want to use outdoor right now, but the indoor pool's operational.
I just wanted to add, well, it was really cool. We had the Winnipeg Ice here a couple of days ago. We showed them and just how impressive, what a great opportunity is to use it. And it was being used at that time as well. So that's good news.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a question about the autism programs and how long we predict sessions to be canceled because of short staffing, and has this occurred in the past?
Young, perhaps I can invite you to answer that question.
Absolutely. So thank you for that question. In the past, we have struggled with staff shortages and cancellations. However, we have really seen an increase over the past year. Oftentimes we are given very short notice on our end to communicate to those who need to know, to families, to childcare centers, to make arrangements. And we recognize it is a hardship for families to have to pivot with an hour's notice, with their employers and making arrangements. And so we are very cognizant of, the fact that, if we can provide advance notice, that would be ideal. We've asked our staff to let us know as soon as possible if they are going to be away. Oftentimes it is unpredictable. Over the last year, we've made concerted efforts to attract and retain staff. We know that, kids really connect with their tutor And it's, it takes weeks to connect. And so we really want to make sure that, we're paying our tutors a livable wage that compensates them for their time, but recognizing that it takes time to build those relationships with the kids that we support. And so we have tried, going to job fairs. We've created promotional videos to make sure that people who are applying know what they're walking into. And so our efforts continue. And then you had mentioned earlier, that's one of the top priorities for us in autism programs, is to stabilize our tutor group.
Okay, thank you, Gail.
Okay, this question might make more sense for Todd to answer. It's why should questions be directed to the nursing staff rather than the manager? What's sort of the role difference there?
Sure. Thanks, Jen. I think it's a good question. I don't think it's a rather than. The unit managers are primarily here throughout the day. And absolutely, we would encourage any family to reach out to the unit manager at any time. Their responsibility is multi-layered, but all the resources, programming issues, and so forth, any questions or concerns should be directed there, and they should be able to provide a response. I wanted to say, talk to you about why we encourage families to speak with nursing staff. We want to ensure that there's accuracy in our response. And sometimes questions are super important from families, especially if around medical or programming concerns, and we want to make sure they're getting accurate information. So our nursing staff have access to the chart. They can recall notes, take a look at what's been going on, and questions around either tests or anything that people have, or how are people doing. We want to make sure that it's accurate. And so in turn, with our staff, we might be a lot of frontline staff are approached. They may not have worked for a while, or maybe they're new to the unit. We want to make sure that families are receiving the right information and the correct information, because we have in the past, over my years of seeing where sometimes the response has been less than satisfying for families. And I think that's a lot of times just in a bit of a gap of knowledge for staff that, again, might be new to the unit. We are doing some reassignment of staff, so they may not just be familiar. So we encourage people to go to the nurse. They have access to a lot of information, as well as the manager. And so it's a great question. So if there's anything they can't, they can ensure that the manager can provide a response as quickly as possible. So that's why we really want families to ensure they're getting the right information at the right time in a timely fashion. And the nurses, you can reach a nurse basically 24 hours a day, and all those off hours, weekends, and the nurse is there at all times, and we'll be able to provide you with that information.
Thank you, Todd.
Okay. There is a question about what is the difference between the coordinators and the team leader's role. So I know Amanda's sick today, but I don't know if Peter might be able to jump in.
Thanks, Jen. Thank you for the question. The biggest difference between team leaders and coordinators is sort of where they spend their time and focus their energies. So the team leader is in the home. That's the expectation, is that they're there for the majority of their working hours. They are interacting with the staff team and the people receiving support services and the family members, and making sure that the things that are important to and important for the people being, living in the home are being addressed, and that the staff team is getting the support it needs in order to provide the right kind of service, getting feedback, getting training. So they're the day-to-day operations kind of level. The coordinators are a little bit of a higher view, I guess, than that. They're the cost center managers. So coordinators have the responsibility for the budgets of the homes that they oversee. And they have some responsibility around supporting the team leaders, providing them with feedback, providing them with assistance and resources to address any issues that may be arising in the home. They would certainly be involved in supporting decisions around the staffing of the home broadly in terms of the overarching schedule and how many EFTs of staff are required. And they're the liaison between the service delivery level, which the team leaders are overseeing, and the funder in terms of putting in requests for crisis funding, putting in requests for additional equipment and supplies and things. And then for the last, couple of years, they've also taken on a little bit more of the case management responsibility because we've been a part of a pilot project. So there they are looking at the overall services that are being provided to the people living in our homes and trying to make sure that they're getting access to all of the right kinds of services. Clinical services, they make the referrals, financial planning and support, individual service planning and support. The coordinators have responsibility around making sure all of those things are happening in a consistent and timely way for people. There is overlap. So, I understand why people might say, well, it's not entirely clear to me of where the differentiations for these two roles. They're both leaders and they're both critical. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Jen.
There's another CRP related question around a nice compliment on the staff and their dedication to picking up shifts and understanding people's medical needs. But wanting to understand better how when staff are hired for a more senior position, they're moved to a new home before a new person is found for the home that they're leaving.
Yeah, so thank you, Lorraine, for the comment and the question. I agree with you completely that we have incredible staff that do great work, and we're very grateful for them all the time. Those are difficult situations, and all that I can tell you is that it's often a negotiation that's happening between the involved homes and coordinators to try and arrive at what's the right timing. So sometimes people are awarded new positions and they're held for a period of time until we are confident that we are close to getting something backfilled. Other times, the place they may be going could be in a real crisis. And then there's a sort of a weighing of which home is in a better shape right now to manage maybe being a little short. So I guess the reassurance I would like to offer is that it is a big picture consideration of what do we think is the best thing to do for the most people. And it does involve lots of thought and consideration. So I know for the home losing somebody, it may not feel that way, but those conversations and deliberations are happening behind the scenes.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, so this is back to a more health and transition specific question around when people are going to move to community, when does the agency staff start receiving training, hands-on training to get to know the person and to understand their personal care, feeding, medication, administration, equipment use, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. And usually, or typically, it's in and around 6 to 8 weeks prior to a transition that staff from the, from that community home will come in to receive that training. So that's typically how that works. And, there's a balance between the quantity of training and timing of hiring staff and so on. And so similar to, Peter's answer to the previous question, there is a little bit of a balance there, but 6 to 8 weeks to get people oriented to the support needs of the person that they'll be welcoming into their into the home is the normal range.
Okay, there's a question specific to the transition nurse's role and whether that person or position is required to have specific knowledge and hands-on experience for the specific individual. Concern that if they don't have that knowledge, that they may have difficulty training agency staff.
Mm-hmm. So great question. So thank you for that. So now if we're talking about, so we have a nurse consultant within housed within clinical services responsible for supporting people transitioning out of health and transition services. There may also in other cases be nurses from somewhere else who might perhaps be involved in training. So I'm not quite sure what scenario this is referring to, but in any case, we're talking about a registered health professional who is responsible for obtaining the right information needed to support someone and to provide the training necessary to support others to meet the needs of that person safely in their new environment. So if there are, specific questions about a specific experience, I'd certainly invite the author of that question to connect with the support team for their loved one to explore those issues and perhaps have those questions answered.
Okay, if families have concerns about the techniques being used, if they're feeling pressured or like the techniques are not respectful in approaching transition conversations, they're wondering whether the transition subcommittee could be reinstated or what the process might be to deal with that.
Yeah, so we're really encouraging families to work. So this is specific to health and transition services, and we're really encouraging families to work directly with their social workers, the social worker assigned to support them through those transition discussions to address those concerns as they are. It's really the team closest to that person who knows them best. It really, I can't give you a good answer for any one individual person. But those conversations should be approached in a collaborative and respectful fashion. That's certainly what we would expect of ourselves, I think, in any situation like that. If there are concerns, there is an escalation process that is available, moving through program leadership and all the way up to me if that's what's required.
Okay, there's a question about where will health and transition services be in the next 10 years? What's the vision? Will it be available for long-term palliative care if people who have moved need to return to HNTS?
Mm-hmm. So that's a very important question. So thank you for asking it. And just a couple of thoughts on that. I'm going to start with the second half of that question and then come back to the front end. So what I can tell you, what I can say is that when it comes to supporting people in the community through the community residential program, for example, there is quite a lot of experience in providing safe, dignified, compassionate end-of-life care to people. In some cases, the CRP has supported people through a very extended end-of-life experiencing that may include changes in cognitive function and other needs, and that those supports are provided with input from clinical services where that's required, with involvement from spiritual health services and others to provide a very high quality and dignified experience. And so the experience of supporting people to have a good death in the community is available. With respect to health and transition services over the next 10 years, we are at an interesting time on our journey with health and transition services. We do expect that the number of people that we support to transition into community over the next 5 years will increase. And so we are on a journey of truly becoming a short-term resource for our community, for children and adults. Specifically what that looks like, well, I think to some extent that is part of an ongoing discussion, but our commitment always is to respond to the unmet needs of our community, to support people with dignity and compassion, to provide high quality supports, and to grow and evolve alongside our community to meet the unmet needs as they exist.
Okay, I think this might be the last question unless anyone pops anything else in the chat. And it's around what is the relationship between Health and Transition Services and the hospital transition worker from CLDS?
Great question. So that is an individual, that transition worker is someone by the name of Christina Lamb, if I'm not mistaken. And her role is to support discharges from Health and Transition Services into the community. So when people now come to Health and Transition Services, it's with the understanding that that is a short-term resource. It is a way station on their journey from hospital, for example, into community. Christina's role is to support us on that journey to ensure that people stay at HNTS only for the time that's required to meet the needs that brought them to HNTS in the first place, and to find them a suitable, appropriate, safe placement in the community.
We have another question that's come in. With MDC closing, will some of these clients be moved to Health and Transition Services?
Yeah, so very good question. So about a year ago, we did sign a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Families, which is the owner of Manitoba Developmental Center, agreeing that if it were necessary, we would agree to accept a very small number of people from Manitoba Developmental Center who meet the current criteria, the eligibility criteria that we have for HNTS. So that might be people, for example, who are approaching end of life and who need a place to stay, a place to have their final days. We have not received any request to support people beyond that. And the last I heard, notwithstanding that memorandum of understanding, we do not anticipate supporting more than a very, very small number of people from MDC at this time.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions right now. Feel free to unmute and ask a question as well if you have anything else on your mind.
Right. Okay, well, I know we've gone a little bit over time, but I do want to thank everyone for asking so many questions and very good questions. I'd like to thank all of my colleagues for being here to answer questions that they are best able to answer. And I'd like to thank Jen as well for organizing and managing this important meeting. So thank you all very, very much. If there are no other questions, I'd like to wish you all a very good evening and a good day tomorrow and a very good long weekend as well. Thank you all very much.